Well, hello, folks. Back again. I'm gonna do a quick video to discuss the nonsense that has been going on lately for the past couple of weeks. Things that just been pissing me off lately. Um, and that is the unbridled ignorance of what's currently foregoing in the United States at the moment. Because it's clear that you know I knew this was going to happen, but I knew that conservatives would, eventually attempt to essentially push theocracy at the end of the day with some of its nonsensical laws, especially regarding abortion. But again, I don't want to have that. You know what? Fuck it. It's a good way to have this conversation because this actually needs to be said 1,000 times over and over again. Um, my opinion on abortion is that I believe a woman should have a right to choose her in this regard. Um, and also, I think it's bullshit. I've always found it bullshit in terms of people discussing abortion rights or gun rights in this country as being cultural war issues for a particular reason. Because let me tell you something, and this is just the absolute fact of the matter. The United States, no one really cared about abortion, particularly in when we get to evangelicals in the United States were pro abortion supporters. The people who were against abortion at the time in the US, I would say you would say in the 40s, were Catholics for obvious bizarre reasons with the Catholic Church. I don't need to bring that up. But at that point, the opposition to abortion in my mind made sense because of Catholic really bizarre nonsensical Catholic doctrine. That goes back I would say like 150 years. So there's history behind Catholicism's position on abortion. Though there's some hypocrisy there too, because pretty sure a lot of those bishops in the medieval era were giving a lot of tea to get rid of illegitimate kids that a noblewoman was having. I'm not going to talk about that, but that's a whole nother conversation. Because again, there's always contradictory. Human beings are contradictory creatures. We contradict our moral ideologies constantly. We will do that morally wise. We will contradict ourselves. So in that sense, I've always said that I don't trust religious fundamentalists. Period. I don't really trust them because I think that they're the most morally hypocritical. But apart from that, the issue here is that there's a case in Florida where they are essentially saying that the Jewish opinion on abortion is invalid because the synagogue is basically suing the state of Florida based on freedom of religion and freedom of speech claims because they have a right to do so. Because they're basically saying this is a ridiculous thing that you're passing with the 15-week abortion thing. Because under Judaism, we believe abortions are actually necessary. Islam, Islam and Judaism, within their doctrines, have no issue with abortion. It's Christianity that, for some apparent reason, has an issue with abortion. And I think this goes back to the history of the Catholic Church and the creation of things like limbo, conceptions about baptism within Christian doctrine. I think that led to sort of the Catholic position on abortion. But it's funny because evangelical Christians didn't really give a fuck about abortion for decades until the 1970s, until we fully ended the process of desegregation. So that comes to tell you that why is it all of a sudden you guys are concerned with abortion when black people started going into your schools? Yeah, there's definitely some really dark hidden eugenics slash racist bullshit behind the anti-abortion movement. There is some not only political propaganda but also some deeply seated good old fashioned American racism. in there because they didn't give a crap about abortion until miscegenation. Now it's evolved into something else with moral implication bullshit, even though we know the origin of it goes back to the 70s where desegregation was happening. Like, no one gave a fuck about this till people started desegregating. And it became a political wedge issue for Target. So for me, I see the abortion debate, from my opinion, as an artificial debate that people are arguing because I know the origin of where it came from. Okay, the only people who can make a moral argument with abortion are Catholics because of bizarre shit in their doctrine, at least that they had for 150 years. That makes sense to me, even though they're still fucking wrong in my opinion. And I think some of these people aren't even reading their fucking Bibles, because it's very clear in Numbers and in Exodus and in Deuteronomy, God says some things about fetuses saying that they're not real people. So I don't know why we're ignoring that in the scripture, which is interesting because Islam and Judaism, they don't ignore that in the scripture. This is why abortion is permitted in their line of sect of religion. It is permitted because God says that He can do that. So, so I don't know where Christians decide to reinterpret the thing, even though it says what it says. But whatever. It's not a whatever. It's just bizarre. But we all know why abortion in America has become an issue. Is because in the 1970s became a wedge issue to get votes, to galvanize white people to vote against marginalized people's interest. That's what it is at the end of the day. Evangelicals in the 30s and the 40s, they were the evangelicals in the United States were the ones that said abortion was fine. They didn't care about it. That wasn't an issue for them. What was an issue, the people who were most gun-ho about abortion were Catholics, conservative Catholics, and maybe some conservative evangelicals, but even then, they didn't really give a shit about it until the 1970s, until Roe versus Wade, until it was used as a political rod to get people to vote for Republicans. What are you going to do? Right? So I've always said, these people are either reading their Bibles wrong because it's there in the text, or they're choosing to ignore the shit, which is very common. They always do that shit. What's there, they act like it's not there, even though it's fucking there. I mean, personally, that it grinds my gears a lot when people do that because you see it's there. Meaning, in my opinion, when you see something that's there, that's in the text, and you ignore it, I'm sorry, that for me, I think you're lying. I think you're being a deceitful, lying motherfucker. That's what I think you are. That's what I think people like that are. Sorry, I just think that way. It might offend some people, but that's what I think. Because you see it, but you choose to ignore it, meaning at that point and aspect, you're being dishonest, i.e., a fucking liar. So, I mean, it's obvious you're just doing this because you know it's wrong, but why do you have to lie in order to prove your position is correct? That's a whole nother conversation about conservatives and all that other point because there's some conservative propaganda where it's like you guys are just lying. Like you guys are just straight lying just to push. If your position is so strong, why don't you just present your position as a strong position? Why do you have to lie about it? Why do you have to be deceitful about your position? If your ideology is powerful, express your ideology. Why do you have to lie in order to cover your ideology? That just means red flag of suspicion to me. you know, and a fascist, it's different because fascists, they do it on purpose because they worship power on an altar. They do that on purpose. They don't care. At least they're honest about that. Right? They're deceitful liars by default of the ideology. So, in general, you know, I'm glad that the synagogue is suing those folks in Florida because it's a violation. And now they're using weird arguments claiming the conservative side using arguments saying that Judaism isn't an organized religion. I mean, I wonder what they're gonna say about Muslims. Like they're gonna say the same shit too. I mean, this is just like they are really really trying hard to justify their bigotry and stretching so much. They're turning themselves into pretzels just to justify this shit. And that's how you know they've really fucked up in that regard. So anyhow, my next video I'm gonna do is about guns and my opinion on guns. But some people might be surprised about my opinion, but I'm gonna discuss that and why I believe gun bans in the United States don't work, and I think there is a deeper issue in the United States when it comes to guns. Because let me tell you something. This is a preview to my other video. Australia, New Zealand, Canada, they all have gun cultures, especially Australia and in New Zealand. But the amount of violence that happens, I mean, even even Somalia, they have guns around, but no one is going around saying they're going to murder a whole bunch of people in Somalia. People say, well, it's a war zone in Somalia. Nah, they have guns in Somalia. Yet no one's going about doing mass shootings. Or the amount of violence in the United States is comparable. I mean, it makes sense. It's a war. It's kind of war torn. It makes sense why there's a lot of that stuff. But the U.S. doesn't make sense and it doesn't fit. Other countries have guns, yet they don't have the same reported violence as the United States. So that argument about gun violence doesn't work. It's becoming more thin and thin and thin. It's becoming like a tunnel that is getting smaller and smaller and smaller to the point in which it just becomes a fucking dot, a white dot you can see because it's just not making sense. The argument is looking ridiculous and more ridiculous, and it's very clear that guns in the U.S. are, I'll save that for another video. But anyhow, folks, this is just my thoughts on that whole situation. Um, and I told people, the conservatives were going to push, and eventually some of these guys are going to start pushing theocratic bullshit now. Um, I mean, what an argument to basically say Judaism's opinion on abortion is invalid because it's not as organized as Christianity. What the fuck? Like that is a theocratic argument because it, from that argument, that person is basically saying, yeah, Christianity is the one true supreme religion, and thus any other religion that is below it is nothing to Christianity. Christianity is the one true faith. That's fundamentalist theocratic bullshit right there. And the fact that you're doing it to the people who actually helped found, the Judaism, the religion where Christianity derives from, and now you're claiming that. I mean, it's just funny to me to see them actually do that. It's like, what happened to the whole Judeo-Christian thing that you guys keep always talking about? It's convenient for you. It's fucking convenient for you. Anyhow, y'all folks have a nice day and stay cool and do what you can to sort of conserve you know your gas tankage because I'm telling you, man, this shit's getting ridiculous. We all know